So I guess what I wanted to do to start off was just recap on the day. And, I have slides, but in the nature of how my world operates, sometimes going off piste is healthy and a good way to be. And one of the key things I wanted to look at today was a kind of a pause moment before we went into this. And I appreciate we're running over, so I'm happy to wrap mine up sooner rather than later. If I could give people a couple of minutes to just pop in the chat box what words are coming to mind, because a lot of what I speak about in the next few minutes is going to be about language and behaviors. So the language part of that is, words wise, what has today meant to you, and what kind of reflections, even if they're kind of in action and they're hot debrief type of reflections, what words are coming to mind for you? So if we could take a couple of, maybe a minute even, to just pop in the chat box, I get an idea of where people are at, that would be fantastic. Okay, well, that's just a couple of minutes to get stuck in. I think the important part would be to say to everybody today, congratulations and well done. What an absolute fantastic day. And Eleth and Claire, what an amazing facilitation and organisation job you've done here. And if I could briefly skim through, because I'm happy to sacrifice my time for the amazing people that have been there today, some of the reflections that I've had very quickly. Confident Chloe kicked us off at the start of the day. So inspiration in her approach to the morning and eye-opening to set the tone. Amanda will surely be getting a call from Brene Brown on her level of vulnerability and openness, and it's something in my day job that I speak a lot about, the identity, kind of the identifying factors and the feel factors of the difference between nervousness, excitement, and how we can manage and monitor that as professional athletes. Queenie's probably not still here because she's off writing a book, and I know some of us will be keeping an eye on Waterstones. Abby, endless notes for me on that, made me check my analytics on my phone after I saw the 70% on the move stat. I'm probably above average on the checks. Steve, for me, so thought-provoking and noticeably supportive throughout the session to all the presenters, and obviously having a nice stopgap there while I was navigating the world of technology. You wouldn't think I had a degree in IT, mind you. Mel's beautiful slides caught my eye initially, and then the articulate messages. My favorite words are toolkit, and that was in there. And then Eisenhower's Tower is dotted everywhere in my other room and on the whiteboard. And then sometimes I do have that debate, as the question came up today, well, what is important and not urgent and not important, but also very important? Dominic, I think you probably made most of us want to look at our CVs, quit our jobs and move to Costco. The clarity and the forward thinking that you provided was really important. Marie, with who I think the majority of the people will be looking for your consultancy after the mind-blowing presentation on gender bias, and I was fortunate enough to have a snippet and have a look at some of the slides, and I was just blown away. I would Sue, continuous learning, that flagged it for me. Yes, please, thank you very much, all day. And also something that I will touch on very briefly is the top-down deconstruction at senior leadership level and how we can approach that with candor. I call it, in the West Ham space that I'm in at the moment, the Pink Panther approach. Caroline and Chris, ally and the continuum, amazing. I'm constantly trying to nourish the relationships that I have with the allies and the people who are willing to drop the lather down. So what an amazing vehicle for conversation that continuum is, and I will definitely want to be signed up for the newsletter. Eleanor, my spare time as a fiction writer, where you get that spare time, I don't know. I used the word superhero in a BBC article last March for Women's Week, and that came to mind. So the facilitation of the individual, I love that term as well. So they were just a couple of notes that I wanted to share, because I thought, what an amazing way to end the day. And yes, I do have some slides, and yes, I have loads of stuff I'd love to share, but a massive thank you to everybody for giving their honest and open angle of their life and their career. So a really short snapshot from me before I go into the share slide. So I'm Jenny Coady, but since April, surviving a lockdown marriage, I am Jenny Co. And I've wondered what the delay is with changing the name over. And, I have the best wife in the world, and we have definitely navigated professionally the COVID period. There's definitely a book in there somewhere. But I was wondering what the ownership was. And I think part of today really evoked that from an emotive point of view with me around how hard I've worked to get to where I am, and the new journey that starts with a new surname, and actually it's me as a person and not the badge or the label or the title. So it's an important reflection for me from today. So you'll hear by the accent, I'm from the worlds of Shamrocks, living in one of the best cities of the world. I've survived the lockdown marriage, as I said, and I'm currently head of performance and wellbeing with West Ham Football Club, with the women's team. And I work across all the other areas briefly at the moment. I think my aim at the moment and going forward is to be an ambassador for change for all areas of women in sport. Performance through wellbeing is the tag that I'm going to use. And then we are working hard at West Ham and with all my network to try and empower and not enable these amazing women who are on their journey in professional sport. So I'll pop over just to give you a few slides, and I think if I feel the vibe, I'm losing the vibe of the room, then I'll definitely just pop off again and have some conversation. So this is part of my journey. I have spent 15, 20 years working in high performance sport. I've spent the last 7 years in England, in London, working across 20 governing bodies at probably mid pathway to Olympic level. So fortunate enough to have worked with some of the Tokyo coaches and Paris coaches and their athletes. To keep myself in tune, I always try to dip into different lectures and deliver across the country and make sure that my research is check and challenge, and you'll see the word challenge coming up as well. So this is kind of what part of my journeys has been, fulfilled. The early stage of high performance sport was me transitioning from playing internationally and coaching internationally to then working for the governing body. I think I was a bit naive jumping into that spot, but you'll hear some of the challenges as I go on and what they entailed. So without further ado and holding on, in the typical sports psych fashion, there's C's and there's triangles. So there's 3 C's here today. And the first one that I'm going to look at is the be kind, is care. So everything that I do at the moment, and this has been part of the journey of all those people and places and systems that are made up of people, have taught me some lessons around care. And, I have mentioned some of the summaries today, but there are endless notes that I've taken around the care element. And the way I've broken the pages up today, because I have said to Ella that I will forward on the slides for nudge and question. There are some incredible companies here today who are doing amazing things that I think sport could learn from. And obviously, we could go pansector on some of our learning. But the 4 words that I wanted to look at were respect, honesty, compassion, and engagement. And I was mindful today that in the short space of time that I had, that I wouldn't just throw loads of words and loads of terms in, because I think there's about 100 webinars over COVID that I was part of, either facilitating or attending. And all of the buzzwords were there and all of the different perspectives on them. But having time to contextualize them into where I was currently working and who I was dealing with was the gap. And how was I getting a chance to understand what respect meant to Steve, or what honesty meant to Chloe, or how I could bring more compassion to my role and check in with people. So I think everything for me, based on kind of the premise of leaning in with curiosity, is around how can I check in and understand who the people are. And some of the nudge questions that I try to use and will instill in my role with the players and the management, the wider staff team in the academies, in the first team on both sides, will be who's in your team, how often do you ask twice, thinking of the mental health and well-being side of my role. Why are they working there? So I think it was Abby earlier on, and a couple of other people have mentioned the why part, which we know from Simon Sinek and his wonderful doodles, understanding why people are there and being able to have that corridor conversation. What does respect feel like, look like, and sound like? And one interesting part of one of my previous roles was people coming along and saying, oh, we're going to have some values, and here's an hour to decide the values, and then we'll have them. Then we'll share what good looks like, and we'll share what great, and then we're done, and we'll put them on a beautiful banner. And you can see that replicated across, all sports. So England boxing, British rowing, all the different gyms and pool sides and everywhere that I've been. There's these, words and colours and alumni and passion, but for me, it's diluted over the years if we don't revisit it. So the respect part of that, and I think there's a dual aspect when we look at respect for ourselves and the journey that we're on, and respect for holding people accountable to their jobs, their role, their communication with you. And the feel part of me is really important, because it obviously is just from perspective. So I think Women in Wholesale had a great tweet out a couple of weeks ago around the perspective of respect, and how do we get to the point, whatever the dynamic is, to share what respect means to you and what it feels and look like. And how do you show value to the people you're working with? So some great initiatives and some great programs in place, but sometimes that sense of belonging and value can come from, again, a conversation and time. So the care part of that, really important over the years, feeling part of something and feeling like I'm valued within that. So the other area was, and I've tagged it here with open your eyes to what's really going on. These happy place fern cotton cards are actually in my house near the front door. So I've just taken them out and put them in a nice little package. So the connection part of this for me is vital. Energy, what does are you being seen or heard? The relationship and the nourishment of that and the community. So we think of like energy, and to think of like the energy that somebody brings to the room, and the adverse effects of that then sometimes being that they're not nourished, or that they're not heard, or that they're not seen in the right way, or people who are more reflective are not giving time in meetings and on the agenda to have a voice. So I think when I think of communication and connection, it's how often do you check in with the message that you're trying to make and how it lands? How do you know you're effective at communicating? And the people that you kind of have on your radar as a good, clear communicator. Do you know how to have those corridor conversations? And I put that in because from Ireland, in the land of storytellers, I had a conversation with my granddad in the world I was working in, when I was seeing all these books of like how to have a brilliant conversation, corridor conversations, TED Talks about conversations. And I said to granddad naively one evening, I said, oh, what's the best conversation you've ever had? And he turned around and he said, oh, all of them, Jen. And he's like in his 80s, and there's years and years of him having conversations with everybody, and he values all the conversation. And that for me was a little bit of getting lost in the industry I was in, getting lost in trying to find the perfect answers, that actually when I call him, he brings the energy that he has. We're on the phone, so it's just heard, but he'll be committed and he'll be very present on the phone, listening and following up on previous conversations. So there is an opportunity for me to be part of his world in that phone conversation that we have, and building on the relationship each time. Sophia Jowett does a lot of work from Loughborough University, does a lot of work in relationships. And she said one day, we were having a webinar, that if you assume that you have a relationship with somebody and you don't nourish that relationship, we're not in a great position. And I think when we look at relationships and we think of my role as an elite athlete or an international coach over the years, or the role that I've had in professional sport for 15 years, the relationships have been really different. And the challenge part of that for me is when I see an article or report from the BBC that says in 2014 they did a study on elite sportswomen, and 40% reported that they had experienced sexism, 7% had actually reported it. Then the study is done again in 2017, and we have 65% reporting, and 75% experience in sexism, and 65 not reporting. It's only 10% reporting. And I thought to myself, well, there's the dynamic of the relationships, there's our breakdown of communication, and the whole interesting world on how we perceive relationships to be. So again, some questions there that are part of the world, are part of the check-in. I've put down normalizing reflection, and that'll come in the challenge part in a second as the third C. But how many communities are the people that you work with, or you yourself part of, that make up that landscape? And what's the value of each of those communities? So the athletes that I work with on a daily basis, they are part of West Ham, they are part of football, they are part of, as in the community of football, they're part of universities, they're part of different groups outside, and that grows and grows, all the microcultures in our group. So if we have a care underpinning that, and they feel part of something within West Ham, and they feel like they matter, then the connection part is how we build on that. And they're a part of a community. So, I do have an office, and I do say the door is always open, as cliched and horrific as sometimes that does sound to me. So I try and get out, and I try and have the walks and meet them in different spaces, and we go for walks, or we're in their chill room, and we're having it as informal to check in with them. So again, just a whistle stop tour of some of the ideas that I thought would be useful to close off today. Life can be tough, but so are you. And for me here, there's a lot that we've talked about around learning and development, and I do think education is brilliant to be at the forefront of that. And the knowledge mastery hourglass of seek, sense, share, I think is really important when it comes to challenge, because the title of the whole presentation when I was talking to Eleth was around not just bringing the team together, but developing and utilizing the strengths and the brilliance within the team. So if we can seek and discover and bring that to the table and sense check ourselves in a check and challenge way, and sense check each other healthily and balanced, like Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety, or Brene Brown's on vulnerability, we're then in a position that when we share and the challenge comes, we've got some of the work from Kim Scott on radical candor. So we're all in a place there where we have the seek opportunity, we're curious, we're exposed to different webinars, conferences, brilliant conferences like today in amazing detail. How are we making sense of today? Because for me, the reality of today is in 6-7 minutes, we'll all switch off, we'll have had a great day, we'll have loads of notes. So something will happen or nothing will happen. And if nothing is happening, then why? And if something is happening, then who do you need around you and in your corner to help you share the brilliance and celebrate those measures of success and those wins that we talked about? And again, there's some questions for your own browsing there, but the key part of this is the challenge and the support. So we are always speaking the narrative of high support, high challenge. And we know it's not sustainable, just like bringing our best self on every day is not sustainable. It's aspirational, and we try to do it with the great people around us. So how can we identify where those people are if you're in a managerial role, where you are yourself? So in some of the sports I worked with, we had chats about whether the coaches were stagnant or they were stable or static, or stable, and how could we kind of support them to be more curious, to be more engaged. And I think, that's the really interesting part of working across so many sports and now coming into football. And the interesting angle for me in this role is that I'm not from football. So where we are talking about allies and inclusivity in certain periods of today, I was bold enough last year, working a day a week, to then create a role that I thought I could really maximise within West Ham. And I brought that to them. And that element, and I think it was Abby earlier on alluded to this, but the unapologetically me, that's what I want to do. I want to be an ambassador for change, and I want to be unapologetically me in this. And I want to have an opportunity to change the narrative, to change the language. So I have a conversation with an assistant coach yesterday about why we call the women's team girls, good job, why we default to that, and who's going to challenge that norm, and what kind of policies, because we know the strength of those, can change some of that narrative. So I'm going to pause after this, but I just wanted to share another little bit of me. And those are two quotes that I try to live by. They kind of emulate me quite strongly. Everyone that you'll ever meet will know something that you don't. So lean in with curiosity. All the observations that I did over 5 years in high performance environments, there are endless models. There are endless ways of beautiful integration of theory. But for me, it's the see, feel, hear. When I go into an environment, what am I seeing? What am I feeling? And what am I hearing? And I can link the 3 C's. But for me, the language and the behavior are underpinning all of that. When I look back and I see, even body language, interactions, etc., etc. A book that I did read, I think it's 1992, Anthony DeMello. And it constantly brings me back to different periods in my life where whether it was a new environment and how I managed that new experience, or whether it was a different country I traveled or explored. And it was how much of me is my parents and how much is me, and in me and Jenny and my new life, my new world, making a decision for myself. And that constructed little piece of the puzzle that's always with me. So what am I really seeing, and how can I gain full perspective to kind of maximize and unlock my potential and share with others? So I'm going to pause there, and I'd happily have and welcome any conversation.
Wow, thanks, Jenny. That was really brilliant. Let's have a look if anyone has any questions for the Jenny. And you are the first high performance coach that West Ham United Women has ever had, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm I feel uncomfortable being so strong about it, but I will proceed. I don't think any other team across the UK has somebody who has it in their title. So there is a lot of people in a performance support role with well-being and mental health on the agenda, but not as an underpin, or not like the performance. If I use the tagline of performance through well-being, then that's the kind of angle we're looking at. So I am working closely with the FA to see what progression we can get from that.
And your team had a big win recently, didn't they?
Well, I wasn't going to boast, but yes, we did beat Man City last week. That was a record, first time ever beating them, and the previous week our first home win in our own stadium. So it's joyous, you know. Like we are not about the wins, but in a ferociously competitive professional setup, that is kind of where people want to take it. The points on the board, the movement up the ladder. But what I did notice is where people did come back with a win, and were excited on the bus, we were having chats straight away on the Monday. So they were in for recovery. We're looking at their goals. They're looking at integrating the multidisciplinary team that I work with into that session. So how can I be on the pitch? How can I take the workshops and bring them to life? How can we move away from surveys and into conversation? So yeah, we're exploring it, but it's exciting times.
That's brilliant. I'm sure you can take much of the credit for that success, for the work that you're doing. There are no questions, just lots of really positive comments.
I have a question for you, Jenny. How different is the support that you give based on gender?
Oh,
what a brilliant question. And I'd say we'll be here till 6 o'clock. Now I'm joking.
We need a glass of wine. Come on.
Me too. Gosh, yeah. Speak. I mean, I had who did we have? Claire and Chris, am I right, when they spoke about the allies? And
Caroline.
I do have some great allies. Caroline, yes, I do have some great allies at West Ham, and I think that shapes it. But the transfer from where I've been in professional sport that has less money to football has opened up a whole different area and spotlighted things that through this sponsorship, which is fantastic, will amplify some of the things that we're not really getting our teeth around. So or like I could list off maybe 10 or 15. Oh, you're the physio. Oh, are you the token female? Oh, you're going to work with the women because they need a bit of, you know, they're very sensitive. So that's where the language is at the core of it. And I think looking at the movement of the sport around support and the self-sustaining element that West Ham want to have, and not being heavily dependent on the men's team, we're moving in that direction, but we still have a long way to go. And that's why I think my role is really important this year. I know that some other clubs, you know, who are quite in a stable position, they don't have sports psychs, they don't have well-being on the radar, the mental health, but the men counterpart will have 6 or 7 full-time staff. So they will revisit a player insight conversation daily just about mental health, well-being, and sports psychology. So we're kind of working at pace. The 8 weeks that I've been in post have been quite challenging, and they've been busy, but I can see the need, and I think the players already really appreciate, and the staff, to be honest, because if they're not growing and learning with us, we're not moving as fast as we need to.
And you mentioned a couple of examples of language. How important is choiceful language in helping to create more of an equal playing field across the two different divisions of football?
Vital. There's I guess 2 angles to that. There's the cues and triggers for the on pitch, and that comes down to, have we spoken to the players about nicknames and how they want to be referenced? Which may sound really silly and surface, but so important. The interactions and behaviours we have from the sideline, to kind of as part of the gameplay. But I think as far as aligning, it's being able to have the courage and the safety, as Chloe talked about earlier on, to feel empowered to say, the quote I heard last year from a different member of staff: "Oh, behind every man is a great woman." And if I had the chance this year, I would say, "Oh, can I walk beside you, please?" Or, sometimes I'll go ahead. But, it's just challenging the norms of how they perceive our roles to be as females in women in sport. Or even, understanding, like I was mentioning earlier on, the reference points of women and girls, and how we want to empower and not kind of enable, and understand the impact of what we say. Every single word can have an impact if we're not mindful. And that there is a perception that men are just tougher and they'll deal with it, and that's not the case. I just think maybe it doesn't get as much exposure, but we have done a great job to try and put that on the agenda as well.
Gosh, there's so much we need to say, but we haven't got the time, have we, Elliot? You need to unmute. You're on mute, Elliot.
Yes, you are right, Claire. Yep. But it's all been amazing, really brilliant. And what a great note to end on. What a great high.
Well, thank you so much, and I really do relish the opportunity, and I'm sorry we had some technical difficulties there, but I'm happy to connect with anybody, email, social media, and continue the conversation.